All right, so I spoke a couple of weeks ago, and I spoke about foundation. And basically, just so you kind of have an idea as to what, when I'm trying to decide what to preach about, normally, like the last few times, I've just gotten a word, searched for a word and gotten a word. And a couple of weeks ago, it was about foundation. And so we spoke about, if you remember, there was a picture of the house out in Gulfport that everything was destroyed and it was built on a solid foundation. So, we kind of went there, and today, throughout the week, I was just struggling. Me and Christy talked a couple times. Pastor Jennifer talked to me on, Wednesday night and was like, what are you preaching about? And I was like, I don't know. Because I was struggling so hard to find, but I kept coming back to the same word, and I would look at this word, and then I would try to find, information about this word and how we could put it into a sermon. And its consistency is the word I came back to. Because I feel like right now, in the world that we live in, there is just so little consistency in our lives right now. Everything is just kind of turned up on its head with COVID and, the simple things like our stores are closing early. We still haven't figured out when we can go to the store and when we can't, because when we used to go to the store, it used to be open at 10 o'clock and now it closes at 6:30. And, we have to wear a mask in this store. But if I don't wear a mask in that store, then it's okay because they're not going to say anything to me. But unless that one employee is there, so then I can try to get in without a mask and then keep my head down and try to stay inconspicuous. And hopefully no one says anything, because then when somebody says something to me, then my wife gets mad at them for saying something to me, and it just gets ugly. And, just everything is just kind of crazy. School started. Well, she gets mad at me. I'm not going to lie. But she takes it out on them, fortunately, because she loves me. But anyway, so school's starting. If you live in Duval County, if you've got a high schooler, I think they go 2 days a week or something like that. Middle schoolers are 4 days a week, and it's just weird. Nothing's normal right now still. You might be homeschooling your kid, and if you've ever done that, there's nothing normal about it. We've been doing it for forever. Your job might be going back to the office, might be starting to transition back. They may not be. You might be working from home for the next 3 months. We don't know, until it could be after the new year. You really have no idea right now. So, we've got all these disruptions in our lives. We've got all these adversities in our lives. And the question is, how do we deal with these disruptions? How do we deal with this adversity? And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. We're going to start out in Jeremiah chapter 7. And basically what's going on here, wow, that's not too small. I can read it. When I was 38, I could read it really well. But after 40, it's been heading downhill. But anyway, so just to kind of let you know where we are right here, Jeremiah was a prophet, and the Lord had spoken to him and basically said, you need to go plant yourself on the steps of the temple at the gate, and you need to talk about this. And we're going to read what that is here in just a second. And it kind of reminds me of that crazy person that's yelling at you about, everybody, you're all going to hell, you're all sinners. And we always kind of walk past them like, that guy's crazy. But that's kind of what's going on here. But he's actually listening to what the Lord's telling him to do because he's a servant of God. He's a prophet. But Jeremiah chapter 7, we're going to start in verse 1, and we're going to go through, I think... we're going to go through verse 11, but it says, this is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Stand at the gate of the Lord's house, and there proclaim this message. Hear the word of the Lord, all you people of Judah who came through these gates to worship the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Reform your ways and your actions, and I will let you live in this place. Do not trust the deceptive words and say, this is the temple of the Lord, this is the temple of the Lord, this is the temple of the Lord. If you change your ways and your actions and deal with each other justly, if you do not oppress the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place, and if you do not follow other gods on your own to your own harm, then I will let you live in this place. in the land that I gave your ancestors forever and ever. But look, you are trusting deceptive words that are worthless. Will you steal and murder, commit adultery and perjury, burn incense to Baal, and follow other gods that you have not known, and then come and stand before me in this house, which bears my name, and say, we are safe to do all these detestable things? Has this house, which bears my name, become a den of robbers to you? But I have been watching, declares the Lord. All right, so basically, what's happening here is Jeremiah just said, y'all are a bunch of sinners, and you're going to hell, and you're a bunch of hypocrites. These people are going out, and they're living their week. They're worshiping other gods. They're partying. They're partying on Saturday, then they're praying on Sunday. They're coming into the church and saying, I'm safe, I came to church. I'm good because I came to church. Everything I did throughout the week doesn't matter because I came to church. And we've got a group of people that have a real problem with consistency. They do it well on Sunday, but Monday through Saturday, they really struggle with worshiping God. And so much so that, as God typically does with the Israelites over and over and over again in the Old Testament, a little while later in this book, they're captured and kicked out, and just what happens with the Israelites on a repeated basis. So this week, this is kind of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about consistency, specifically consistency in our faith, consistency in our ministries, consistency in our daily lives. Consistency is one of those things that a lot of times it just kind of seems insignificant. It's like, yeah, my life is crazy. It's just how I live. I mean, big deal. It's not a topic that we really think about very much, really until inconsistency hits. That's when we start to think about consistency. Think about your lights. I can tell you, like for me, our house on our road, actually in our entire neighborhood, they replaced all the light poles 6 months ago, something like that. They replaced all the light poles in the neighborhood. And we always had we live in America, so we had lights. And it worked out well for us. But then they replaced all the lights, and all of a sudden, at least twice a week, our lights would just randomly be gone. Just shut off for no reason. We'd call, and they'd say, yep, there's an outage in your area. And, Christy and I work from home, so not having power is kind of not a good thing. Plus, we live in Florida, and AC is always an awesome thing as well. But, so it became a hassle. The inconsistency of our lights, it was like, whoa, what happened to this thing that we relied so heavily on? The internet here in the building literally will, like if you're watching, there's a little thing down there on the live stream that tells you how good the internet's doing. And if you watch it, it'll be like great, and it'll have like a little green light, and then all of a sudden there'll be nothing. And like if you're watching at home, you'll be like, what happened to the live stream? They must have just turned it off. No, we didn't. It's the inconsistent internet that did it. We find inconsistencies in things that we want to be consistent. And as long as they're consistent, we kind of forget about them. We forget about the fact that every time we flip the switch, the lights are going to turn on. We forget about the fact that every time we get on our computer, the internet's going to work. We forget about things that are consistent. And we tend to overlook them. We celebrate things in the moment. We celebrate, when somebody gets on Instagram and posts a picture about, hey, I've lost 50 pounds in the last 3 weeks. That's awesome. We celebrate that person. We say, great job. You look amazing. But then, when they've kept that weight off for the last year, we don't really celebrate that achievement, that consistent work over the course of a period of time. We just kind of forget about it. And, when we go to Starbucks and we've got that kid that always makes our latte just perfect, we never really say, you know what, you do a really good job. Now, if they mess it up one time, Karen comes out. I'm sorry if there's anybody in here named Karen. That's a bad. But that other side comes out, and we let them know how bad of a job they did. See, Hebrews 13 verse 8 says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Christ is consistent. God is consistent. He is a God of consistency. He does not change, ever. And you can say, yeah, well, he used to, if you look at the Old Testament versus the New Testament, well, I can go back and look at the Old Testament and show you how it did not change from the Old Testament to the New Testament. He does not change. He's a God of consistency. We were built in God's image. We were built for consistency. We were built, I mean, you listen to your heartbeat and it's boom, 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 boom. And if it's not doing that, there's a problem. You know, if it's not beating consistently, then you're probably going to end up in the hospital. You know, in your diet, if you don't eat consistently, like me, you start to grow in areas you're not supposed to grow in. And, I mean, your sleep, I mean, if you have a consistent sleep pattern, that's what makes you healthy. If you eat consistently, you sleep consistently, you're more healthy, you're able to function better. Same thing in your spiritual life. You know, when you're consistent in your spirituality, you're able to live a better life. You're able to function as you're supposed to function, as you're meant to function. In 1 Corinthians 15:58, Paul says, "Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast and immovable always, abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain." And so you got to think about who he's talking to here. He's talking to the church in Corinth, and these people are struggling. I mean, these people are living in a culture where consistency is not a popular thing. Faith in the Lord is not a popular thing. A consistent lifestyle is not a popular thing. I mean, they're living in this time when everything is just kind of falling down around them. And so Paul, what he's doing here is he's trying to build them back up, and he's telling them, be consistent, be steady. You know, I mean, they're living in a time of uncertainty, kind of similar to what we're living in. I mean, it's really no different when you've got Facebook ripping down things that are, you know, Christian-based things off, and because, you know, they're just trying to push their initiative and their agenda, and we've got people that persecute us for our Christianity and yell at us and tell us what kind of hypocrites we are. It's very similar to the time we're living in right now. But Paul is telling us, be steadfast, be immovable, understanding that no matter what you're doing, you're not doing it in vain. If you're doing it for the Lord, you're not doing it in vain. He reminds us, it's funny that Cooney said you're storing up treasures in heaven. I literally have it written right here. He reminds us that they're storing up treasures in heaven. It's not about what's happening around them right now. It's about being consistent and working for God and understanding that they are working for something greater, that nothing that they do is going to be in vain. You know, consistent lifestyles don't always make you popular. I'm not a basketball fan, never have been, but I watch sports, and if you are a basketball fan, you've heard of Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan is probably one of the best basketball players to ever step on the court, but you never hear about him. You never hear his name really spoken. When they talk about the best basketball players ever, you hear Michael Jordan, you hear Kobe Bryant, you know, you hear all these, you know, whatever. But you never hear Tim Duncan's name, even though Tim Duncan has just as many championships as Kobe Bryant does. And the reason is he was always a person, he never spoke, he was always quiet, and he was actually known as the big fundamental because he had perfect fundamentals. Everything he did was just consistent. He just went to work every day, and he did his job, and he did it better than anybody else, and he didn't talk about it, and he didn't show off, he didn't do anything, he just showed up and did his job. So therefore, he's not nearly as popular as some of these other athletes that show up, and maybe they're not as good, but they're a lot more showy. If you think about the Grand Canyon, I mean, the Grand Canyon didn't just have like 4 guys in a dump truck show up and dig it out. I mean, it started with a river just constantly, steadily, consistently flowing over a long period of time. And over that time, it built this hole in the earth, this crack in the earth that's a mile deep and a mile wide. I mean, consistency is a powerful thing. It's something that can shape your career. It can shape your relationships. If you consistently treat your spouse, you know, poorly, you're probably not going to have a great relationship. If you consistently show up to work late or don't do a good job on your job, you're probably not going to have a great career in that place. You know, if you're constantly yelling at your kids or getting on to your kids, you know, your household is not necessarily going to be a calm place, a great place to be. So we know about how important consistency is. We know that it takes time to build a healthy body. We know that it takes consistency to build a healthy financial situation. We know that it takes consistency to break an addiction. We know these things, so why is it different than when it comes to our walk with Christ? Why is it that we find it so hard to be consistent as Christians? And for a lot of us, it's because we have something in the way. Something is blocking it. For some of us, it's a character issue. I mean, for some of us, and not necessarily a character issue that you would necessarily point to and think, oh, that's an awful thing. I mean, it could be that we have a problem prioritizing our time. It may be that we have a problem. It could be something worse. It could be an addiction that's blocking that consistency. It's there are different things for all of us that prevent us from finding that consistency in our lives, even though the Bible tells us over and over and over again that we need to constantly renew our mind, constantly seek God. We're constantly, it's always about constance and doing and over and over again. If you're a ministry leader in this church, maybe your ministry isn't growing the way you want it to grow. Maybe your ministry is not functioning the way you want it to function. And it could be, I'm not saying that it is, but it could be because of consistency. It could be that you're not, what are you putting ahead of that? Are you spending the time to get in front of people, to talk to people? Are you spending the time in prayer? Are you spending the time in preparation? I got to brag on my wife a little bit here because you guys know that we started the Under 30 ministry, it's been a month and a half ago now. And, we find it hard sometimes because we would show up and there'd be 3 or 4 people there, and Colby and Christy are there and Tyler's there, but then sometimes they're not, and then other people are there, so we'd have like 3 or 4 people. But then, but she's constantly posting on Instagram. She's constantly posting on Facebook. You guys are probably tired, if you follow the page, you're probably tired of seeing us share things. But she's constantly working at it. She's consistently putting things in front of people. And last week, we had a new person show up. We don't know who she is. We know who she is now, but we didn't know her. We know her now. It's not. I don't see her in here today. She has her own church, but a young lady that decided to give it a shot. Someone showed up, and it wasn't because of anything but her consistency and her work to try to advance this ministry. And putting God first whenever she's been, gets the feeling like, why am I doing this? I mean, literally, we're just talking to the same kids, which is awesome. We love those. I can't call them kids. I forget that. Y'all are grown, the same adults, and we love them. But it can be frustrating when you're not getting the response from the other people that you're trying to direct it to. But she kept pushing, and we finally got somebody. And who knows? Next week, maybe we'll have another person. But it starts with a trickle. So what's keeping us from ultimately finding that consistency that we need? And for most of us, it's because we're consistent in the things that we find important. We're consistent in showing up to work every day because we know if we don't show up to work, then we're going to get fired, and therefore we're not going to have a job, which means we're not going to have a house. We're consistent in making sure our kids go to school every day because we know if they don't go to school, they're not going to be smart and they're going to end up homeless one day or whatever it is. But we're consistent in getting that kid to t-ball practice because we know if we take them to t-ball practice every day, eventually they're going to grow up and they're going to be a professional baseball player and they're going to be able to take care of us. We're consistent. I'm speaking that over your unborn baby, Michael. So, but anyway, we're consistent in the things that we find important. If we find reading the Bible important, we'll consistently read the Bible. If we find prayer important, we'll consistently wake up and pray. We'll pray without ceasing, as Paul tells us. So why is consistency so important? And mainly, it's so important not for the good times. I mean, we do great in the good times. You know, things are great when you're on top of the mountain. You can do whatever. Everything's good. It's for when you're in the valleys. It's getting through the valleys. So you have to do the right things in the good times so that you can get through the bad times. Think about the stock market. We've got financial advisors, and all of us have seen graphs of the stock market before, different stocks and things. So this is Amazon, 2018. I don't know what their stock looks like now. Honestly, I hadn't looked. But if you look at this graph, I mean, it's so much like, it's my little arrow, but you see it goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. And if you have an inconsistent mindset, then as you're watching this stock, if you're invested in this stock, whenever you start to see this big decline right here, like it's done so good, and you had a little dip, but then it went back up again, and it's doing great, but then it starts to take this big dip. And then if you're inconsistent in your faith, if you're inconsistent in your investing, if you're inconsistent in your mindset, you get to this point and you're like, I got to get out of this, and I sell my stock. But we forget that it's about a marathon. It's about over time. So instead of just stopping right here where it dipped down there right around the month of April, if we stick it out, eventually it grows, it continues to grow, it continues to build. And that is why we need consistency. It's not about the peaks, it's about the valleys. It's about not getting scared when you hit the valleys. It's about pushing through when you hit those valleys. So we have to develop an appetite for consistency. When we do anything, if we're not consistent, if we don't have that desire to be consistent, some people are like really consistent. I don't understand those people. They like get up at like 5:30 in the morning, and they like get up and they work out every single day, and then they clean up, and then they take the kids to school, and then they get to work on time, and then they come home and they cook dinner, and then they put do the kids' homework, and they go, and they're like super consistent. And I don't understand those people. But if you're not a consistent person, if you're like me, you have to work at it. It's something that you have to develop an appetite for, because your meaningful walk with God doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen overnight. You don't just randomly say, "Ooh, now I'm saved. I've got a great relationship with God." It doesn't work that way. It requires work. It's no different than your marriage that requires constant work. Your relationship with God must develop over time. When we lack consistency, it's because we lack discipline. When we lack discipline, we fail to develop. Hebrews 6:1 says, "Therefore, leave us the elementary doctrine of Christ and go on to maturity." We've got to move past the basics. It's easy to stay right here and not develop once we get saved and we say, "Jesus loves me, this I know," and we stay there. It's so easy to stay there. But at some point, we've got to start developing beyond that. And that's where consistency counts. That's where we start to truly grow in Christ. We start to build a relationship that we thought was good until we actually see what it really could be. Then we get to that next level. But see, for a lot of us, we kind of make the mistake of thinking that consistency requires perfection. And it doesn't. See, perfection is something that we can't achieve. Consistency is not perfection. A lot of us use that as a crutch. We say, "Well, I'm going to screw up anyway, so why even bother? I mean, I'm not going to make it through this anyway, so what's the point?" And we just say, "I'm just going to give up on it." But see, the fact is, consistency is not about a moment. It's not about what we did. It's about what we do. It's a sum of the parts. It's, as a math teacher, it's talking about the sum. It's the average. It's, we're finding, we're looking at everything that we do over time. We're going to have dips. We're going to have stumbles. We're going to fall. We're going to screw up. And we can either allow that to just stop us and just give up, or we can use a consistent mindset and go beyond that. We can't let our dips define us. We have to go beyond that. As we grow in consistency, we grow in steadfastness, we hit those bumps. When we are consistent, it keeps us from giving up. We get so close to reaching that next level, that next step in our relationship. But then, COVID happens, and we decide that, well, I can't go to church anymore, so I'm just going to stop. Whatever it is, there's always something that comes to trip us up. The Bible says the righteous man falls 7 times, but 7 times he rises, right? The Israelites walked around the walls of Jericho 6 times. On the 7th time, what happened? The walls came down. Naaman dipped himself in the Jericho River 6 times, and on the 7th time, he was cleansed. It requires consistency. See, we're going to look in 1 Kings chapter 18, another prophet, Elijah, and Elijah gives us a pretty good example of consistency here. If you're not sure who Elijah is, basically, this is just after Elijah had been alone in the wilderness for 3.5 years. He comes back and he basically destroys the temple of Baal. He literally has 450 of their prophets murdered because he showed up and he showed them who God really was. And so Elijah's a pretty bad dude, but at this point, this is after he had all of the priests killed, and which I'm not here to judge. Mike could have thrown him in jail or something, but that's not me, not my decision. But anyway, so we're in 1 Kings chapter 18, and it says Elijah said to Ahab. And you have to remember we're in the middle of a drought here, and so there's been 3 years of drought. And so Elijah shows back up on the scene, and he says to Ahab, "Go eat and drink, for there is a sound of a heavy rain." So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. I would demonstrate that, but I would hurt myself. "Go and look towards the sea," he told his servant. And he went up and he looked, and there was nothing there. He said, "Go back." 7 times Elijah said, "Go back." And go back. And go back. And go back. Go back up the mountain. But Elijah, there's nothing there. Go back up the mountain. Keep doing it. I know, but there's nothing there. I know, but go back up the mountain. Look again. It's not raining, Elijah. I know, but go back up the mountain. I've got this, I keep stumbling on this same addiction, God, I know, but go back up the mountain. I keep forgetting to read the Bible, God, I know, but go back up the mountain. I keep having the same fight over and over and over again with my spouse, God, I know, but go back up the mountain. I keep having the same issue with my finances, God, I know, but go back up the mountain. He tells us, go back up the mountain, go back up the mountain, go back up the mountain. Because on the 7th time, the servant reported, there's a small cloud the size of a man's hand rising from the sea. Just a little cloud. There's a cloud. So Elijah said, "Go tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain can stop you." There's literally a cloud this size. That's a pretty small cloud. And he says, "Go back up. Go tell Ahab to hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Meanwhile, the skies grew black with clouds, wind rose, the heavy rain started to fall, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord, this is my favorite part, the power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. So he's outrunning the horse. He's jacked up. He's ready to roll. And so he's like, you know what? I'm going to tuck my skirt in, and I'm gone. And you got to imagine Usain Bolt is chasing him, and he's past him. He's just flying. The Spirit of the Lord is on him. He's jacked up. He's ready to roll. There's so much in this scripture that we can learn from Elijah when it comes to consistency. The three things that I want to point out that lead us towards a faith-filled, consistent life, what his consistency did and how it helped develop his life and his relationship, the things that can either push us away from God or draw us into God, the things that we can either allow the enemy to push us away, or we can say, you know what, enemy, I got this. I'm going to keep going forward. The first thing is way back in the first verse there, when it says, when he sends I'm sorry, not in the first verse, but in verse number 44, and he says, there's a small cloud. I'm sorry. Lost my spot. It is actually back in the second verse, verse 42. Says there's a heavy rain. There's the sound of a heavy rain. There's the sound of a heavy rain. So he's heard from God. He can't see anything. We know that God's speaking to him. We know that God's telling us to do something. There's the sound of a heavy rain. So we hear from God, but we don't see anything yet. If you know anything about rain, you know that how the rain cycle works is the water starts rising up from the sea. You don't see it happening, but it has to go up first before it can form a cloud. So you hear this word from God, and God starts immediately working. He starts doing something, but you can't see it. You don't know it's happening. You just have to trust that it's happening. So he's heard from God. He knows that there's going to be rain, but he doesn't see the rain yet. He doesn't see the cloud yet. We don't see a way for it to happen. We don't see a path for God to provide what it is he's told us he's going to do. We don't see how it can happen, but we hear it. We hear God telling us to do something. We hear God telling us, this is what I want you to do. But we keep finding, but God, I don't see it. I don't see how it can happen. There's no way that I can achieve this. But God's already working. He's telling us to do something. We've been praying for it. We know he's calling us to do something. And we get to this first step of faith where we can't see it. We hear it, but we can't see it. We might be able to feel it, but we can't see it. See, this is an important part because we have an opportunity here. Because we can't see it, we can either let the enemy tell us it's not going to happen. I mean, that was just Taco Bell that you're hearing. That's not God. Or we can have faith. We can allow the enemy to lead us away knowing that, it's just a passing thought. Or we can dive in understanding that God is speaking to us. God is telling us what to do. Sometimes we don't immediately see that change. We don't immediately see what God's plan is. We don't immediately see how he's working because there needs to be a change in us first. You think of somebody like Abraham. Abraham was 75 years old when God said, you need to get up, pack up your family, and move. And if you do this, I'm going to give you a land. I'm going to make you the father of nations. I'm going to make your family bigger than, more numerous than the stars in the sky. I'm going to make a blessing come through your line that will bless every family in the world. And so he gets up and he does it. He has faith and he does it, but then he gets impatient. And about the time he's 86, he's like, you know what, God, you're not doing I don't see you working here. I'm not seeing what's happening here. And so he kind of goes out on his own and he takes his wife's servant and they have a child, Ishmael. And Ishmael, if you were in the Old Testament class last year, you know that Ishmael eventually was the father of the Ishmaelites, which eventually became the Muslim nation. And so hopefully your screw up doesn't get that bad to where you literally create an entire religion that hates you. But he did have faith. He continued to accept that he needed to wait for God's timing, that he couldn't see God working, but he knew he was working. And so when he became, when he reached the age of 100, Sarah would have been right around 98. Any of you ladies want to have a baby at 98? I'm not, that would not be good. But when he finally submitted and accepted and lived in faith, then God was able to fulfill the blessing that he had promised. See, what part of what Elijah did as he was sending that servant up and down the mountain, up and down the mountain, up and down the mountain, what did Elijah do the whole time? He stayed there and he prayed. Kept his head down and he prayed the entire time. And it may be that he did that because he knew that if he were the one going up the mountain and looking, that it was going to shake his faith. We don't know, but it may be that if he was the one looking out over that sea and seeing nothing, that he would have his faith shaken. So he didn't worry about what was going on. He let somebody else worry about that. He did what he needed to do, which was stay faithful. He stayed in prayer. He kept his head down, and he prayed constantly. Instead of keeping our eyes on God, we pray for the change in, I'm sorry, I need to just give up on notes because I can't read them anyway. But anyway, instead of, focusing on everything that was going on around him, he focused on God. So many times we pray for change in our lives and we say that prayer and then we immediately go back to doing the exact same thing that we were praying for freedom from. We pray for peace, but then we immediately open our phone back up as soon as the prayer ends and get right back into the mess that we're trying to get peace from. And instead of just keeping our head down and keeping consistent and keeping focused on the things that we need. It takes consistency, constantly renewing your mind, constantly removing the distractions from your mind. The second thing he teaches us is to celebrate the insignificant. There was a cloud, just a little tiny cloud. And, for a lot of times we have something happen. We had a girl show up, just one person. And we could say, yeah, we've only got 6 kids now, 6 adults now. But no, we had a new person show up. We had something, that's great. That's something to celebrate. So many times we take this mentality, I'm only preaching to 4 kids, or I'm watching one baby in the nursery, or we're only feeding a few families out of the pantry. Thank you for the word. But instead, the Bible tells us, don't despise humble beginnings, but the Lord rejoices in seeing the work begin. So, instead of saying, I only get to minister to these 4 kids, we can say, I get to speak life into the 4 people. Instead of saying we only get to feed a few families, you get to say, I got to help provide dinner for a family that would be starving tonight, a child that would not have eaten tonight. Instead of saying, I have to just watch one kid, what's the point in nursery? We get to say, I get to allow a hurting mother come in here and sit and be fed and have an hour and a half of peace. It's celebrating the insignificant, the tiny things. So many times it starts with something small. It starts with something insignificant. It starts with a tiny little cloud, and we miss it. And we allow the busyness of our lives to say, we allow that to pass by, and we totally miss it, or we allow the enemy to just say, yeah, but it's just something small. It's just one little paycheck. It could have been better. If you'd gotten that other job, your paycheck would have been a lot bigger. It's just, one little family. That church down the street's feeding 600 families. We forget about the little things. We have to learn to celebrate the insignificant. If you can learn to celebrate the insignificant, we learn to celebrate the small things, we get a win. We get to celebrate that win, then we get another win. We get to celebrate that win, and then we get another win. And it just slowly builds and builds until the next thing you know, that one little win back there is now, we're on the other end of the stock. We're on the other end of the trend where we had those little dips, but now we're way up here now instead of being way down here. Celebrate the small things. Build upon the little things. Enjoy it. Don't always look at what you could do better. Because I can guarantee, and I'm the world's worst, because whenever I get down off the stage, I'm going to say, that's probably the worst sermon I've ever preached. I couldn't even get my words straight. But, you celebrate the small things. The last thing he teaches us is finish strong. Finish. When he picked up his cloak and he started running all the way back to Jezreel, he didn't stop. He finished. He knew that the blessings were coming. The blessings were rolling in. The rain was falling. That's what he wanted. But he didn't just stop there. He didn't just say, all right, got that done. I'm going to go back to being in exile for 3 more years. No. Well, actually, he did. But we're not going to that part. We're not going to that chapter. That's later on. We're going to stop here. We're taking this little win. We're going to celebrate this win. But he finished. He finished strong. He didn't get satisfied. He didn't get comfortable. See, so many times we see things start to happen, things are positive, things are moving, and we get comfortable with it. We get satisfied with it, but we haven't finished what God put in front of us. We haven't finished the race yet. We're going to close here in just a moment, and basically I just kind of want to ask you a few things. How do you characterize consistency in your life? Is your life consistent? Is your spiritual life consistent? Mine's not. I try to pray constantly. I try to read the Word, but normally I get distracted and I do something else. I'm not going to lie. I'm not unique. How is your prayer time? Is it consistent? How is your Bible time? Is it consistent? How is your giving? Is it consistent? How is your godly attitude? Is it consistent? Are you that person that's like super happy one day and then you're in the toilet the next day? Do you celebrate the victories? Do you tell that person how amazing they look? How build up that other person? Are you spreading love? Are you spreading God's word? Are you finishing strong? Think about the impact we can have on people if we just walk around with a godly attitude. You want to talk about all the crap you see on Facebook? I said crap. Sorry, Pastor. We can sit here and go over all of that stuff constantly, and it's just going to bring your attitude down. But if every time you saw someone else, if you said something about them that was going to lift them up, if you said something, hey, you do a really good job serving. I'm not sure, you may have things going on in your life, but I can't tell because, you're killing it today. You're doing great. What are we doing to lift other people up? How are we living a consistent, godly life? Some of us might be in a dip right now. Some of us are, you guys can go ahead and come up if you want. Some of us might be sick of COVID. We're sick of masks. We're worried about our family members. We might be sick of the violence that we're constantly seeing. We might be sick of politics. We might be, might be hitting a rough patch in our marriage, our job, our life, whatever it is, struggling to pay our bills. But that shouldn't keep us from glorifying God. Doesn't matter what it is you're going through, there's always a reason to celebrate. There's always a win. There's always something small that you can celebrate. Don't let the dips draw you away from God. Don't let the drought draw you away from God. Let God draw the drought out of you. You know, you can have all this stuff going on around you, but it doesn't matter if you're being consistent in your walk. You're never going to get away from, there's always going to be something. There's always going to be something to pull you back. But you have to be consistent. You have to put God first. You have to be the one to take responsibility for yourself. I'm going to leave you with one prayer, Psalm 119, 133. And I hope that you would pray this over yourself. I hope you would pray this prayer over others around you. Keep my steps steady by your word. Don't let any sin rule me. Keep my steps steady based off of your word, based off of what you want me to do. Not based off of what I want to do, not based off of what the world wants me to do, but based off of what you want me to do. Steady my steps. You see this over and over and over again throughout the word. Steady my steps, God. Inconsistency is not a new thing. It happened in the Bible, and it happens now. But we have an opportunity to take a step forward and understand that you might fail, you might draw back, you might have a dip. You know, maybe it is something as simple as reading the Word every day. Maybe it is something as simple as getting up and praying, and you might miss a day. Maybe it's something as simple as actually with your spouse saying, we're going to pray over our family every day. And then you might miss a day, and you slip. Don't let it go for 2 days. I love that. That's something that Pastor Grishel at Life Church says. You know, pray every day. If you miss a day, don't make it 2 days. That's how you build consistency. As you're, you know, maybe it's getting a healthier lifestyle. I don't know. Maybe it's working on a relationship, and you can work on that every day. And there are going to be days that you screw it up. And you have an opportunity to get back on track, to be consistent. As the band plays, we're going to just go ahead and close in prayer. And we're going to worship for just a moment. If you do need to come for prayer, the altars are going to be open. But go ahead and bow your heads for me. Father, thank you so much for this opportunity to bring your word, Lord. I pray that the word that was spoken has landed softly, that it has allowed someone to leave this place differently than the way they came, Lord. I pray that everyone in here will strive to be more consistent in their spiritual life, in their home life, in their financial life. Consistency, Lord. It's not something that we praise enough, but it's something that you are the ultimate consistency. You are the unchanging God. And we just strive to be like you. Help us to seek to be more like you, God. Help us to put you first, understanding that we're going to continue to screw it up, but it's not about who I am in the moment. It's about who I am in my heart. It's about who I am over time, God. Help me understand that no matter how many times I fall, you're going to be there to pick me right back up. No matter how many times the righteous man falls, he's going to continue to stand back up, Lord. And help me stand back up. Help us stand back up, God. Help us to constantly renew our faith in you, Lord. To constantly celebrate the wins, God. To constantly celebrate the things that you are doing in and around us, God. Because as we can learn to celebrate those small things, then we get to recognize and we get to see the growth that you really are putting in us, God. Even when we don't see it, you're working. Even if we don't feel it, you're working. Such a perfect song, God, because that is who you are. You are the one that provides a way. You are the way maker. You are the one that provides that consistency we need. We hear a word. Are we going to act on the word knowing that you're going to help us fulfill it? What are we going to do? Are we going to be like Elijah and have faith and block out everything else that's going on around us and just seek you, God?